Kawasaki's Versys X300 is back on sale in India after nearly a 5-year hiatus. Well, since then, not a lot has changed. It's still powered by the same high-revving parallel twin, still has the tall ADV stance, and still rides on a set of 19 and 17-inch spoke wheels. What has changed since then, however, is the context. In 2025, this ADV segment has significantly grown. Competitors like KTM 390 Adventure and Royal Enfield's Himalayan offer more tech, torque, and touring chops at a much lower price. Honda has already plugged the parallel twin space, and CF Moto is soon to join the club. So with that, where does this reborn Versys 300 fit in? And does it still hold up in today's time? Visually, there's nothing new here apart from the two fresh color schemes. This 2025 bike is mechanically identical to the 2017 model and is now compliant with the latest emission norms. The only thing is, this time around, it doesn't come with a single luggage pannier. That said, it still looks purposeful with its tall, slender bodywork. The fit and finish are solid, which is typical of Kawasaki, with tactile switchgear, clean panel fitment, and decent paint quality. But features are where the Versys 300 feels most outclassed. There's no TFT screen, no ride modes, no traction control, and no switchable ABS. You don't even get accessories like crash guards or handguards as standard anymore. Instead, Kawasaki offers them separately at a fairly high cost. In a segment where rivals are throwing practically the kitchen sink, the Versys 300 feels bare bones. In terms of ergonomics, the Versys 300 is fairly approachable. For someone of my height, and I'm about 6 feet for reference, the riding posture is pretty neutral and upright. For reference, my videographer Harshad is about 5'7" in height, and here's what it looks like when he tries to sit on the bike. Standing ergonomics are pretty decent, however, they could have been better. My problem with the standing ergonomics is that, for one, the foot pegs feel too thin and dig into the sole of your foot, and over time can cause discomfort. Secondly, the posture isn't as accommodating for tall riders, and as I've discovered, this isn't the sort of motorcycle you'd want to take off-road, but more on that later. In terms of comfort, the seat is firm but supportive. I didn't find it too discomforting. However, in case you do, Kawasaki will sell you an accessory seat which is slightly taller and better padded, but will cost you 20,000 rupees. Meanwhile, the tall windscreen remains fixed and causes noticeable wind buffeting and noise at highway speeds, particularly for tall riders. Shorter riders may not find it as intrusive, but an adjustable screen would have greatly helped improve long-distance comfort. In terms of performance, this is one area where the Versys 300 still stands out. It is still powered by the same 296cc parallel twin that it shares with the Ninja 300 and still has that peaky characteristic. This motor truly comes alive after 6,000 RPM, and it's only after that that you notice a slight buzz starting to creep in. As you go higher up the rev range, that buzz becomes slightly more pronounced. Vibrations aren't as prominent as some of its single-cylinder rivals. However, they are prominent enough for you to notice them. The engine is tractable in higher gears and pulls cleanly from 50 kph in 6th all the way to 150 kph. Post 9,000 RPM, the motor packs a lot more oomph and will scream its way to its 12,500 red line and sounds quite good while doing so. As fun as this may be, it's quite uncharacteristic from what we've come to expect from motorcycles of this format. Plus, in terms of sheer torque, this motor is quite weak compared to its rivals, and you will have to get used to riding in a lower gear and shifting a lot more than usual. In fact, in our test, the Versys 300 clocked a 7.5 second 0 to 100 time, which puts it in line with other 300cc single-cylinder motorcycles, but slower than 400 or 450cc singles. While tractable, this motor will sit at about 7,000 RPM while cruising at 100 kph, and it isn't a very smooth affair. If anything, this motor enjoys being engaged in a spirited manner, and the only way to truly enjoy it is by revving its heart out and banging through the smooth, slick shifting 6-speed gear. Do that and the Versys 300 is genuinely fun to ride on the road. In fact, it prefers to be ridden like a sports bike rather than an off-road ATV. During our test, the bike returned a highway fuel efficiency figure of 27 kpl and 25 kpl in the city. While these figures are lower than its rivals, the 17-litre tank means that you're still looking at a 400-kilometer range on a full tank. Heat management is relatively well contained and should only be a problem for those wearing shorts.
In terms of handling, it continues to feel planted on smooth roads and around corners. Its 41mm telescopic fork and preload adjustable monoshock do a good job on well-paved tarmac, and the chassis feels solid and confidence-inspiring. However, the suspension has limitations that are quite easy to reach. This is because it only has 130mm of travel at the front and 148mm of travel at the rear, and compounding the issue is the fact that the front is too soft. General rough roads are handled well, but larger and sharper bumps and potholes are not absorbed gracefully, and the front end often reacts with a loud thud when it encounters a deep pothole. All in all, the ride quality is not bad, but it's also not as sophisticated as some of its rivals.
In terms of dynamics, it's quite playful and light on its feet on the road, and I thoroughly enjoyed going around corners on this motorcycle. However, when it comes to off-road, the chassis and suspension setup don't feel at home, and the lack of switchable ABS doesn't help either. While the brakes perform adequately, the ABS seems quite intrusive. These new MRF tires do a good job in both wet and dry conditions, and on-road I've had no complaints with them thus far. Unlike the rest of Kawasaki's Versys lineup, the 300 is the only one to get spoked wheels, and unfortunately these aren't tubeless wheels. Which is a shame because this isn't the sort of bike you'd want to take off-road very often, and having a pair of alloy wheels would have given you the peace of mind when it comes to punctures. That being said, at 180 mm of ground clearance, this should be able to do light trails. In 2017, the Versys 300 stood as a niche for riders looking for a long-distance tourer with a smooth engine that's rev-happy and dependable Japanese engineering.
Aided by the recent GST cuts, this motorcycle undercuts its predecessor's price tag by little over $1 lakh. However, despite the significant price drop, it still feels out of step with the segment. It lacks features, feels dated in key areas, and is still priced higher than far more capable and better equipped rivals.
That said, it's still a unique motorcycle, and if you're someone who plans to spend most of the time on the highway, likes a parallel twin, and likes Kawasaki's reliability, this motorcycle will perhaps still speak to you. For the rest of you, however, KTM's Adventure 390X and Royal Enfield's Himalayan 450 are far better offerings at a much lower price. And if you still want a parallel twin, perhaps wait for CF Motor launch their 450 or make the stretch for Honda's NX500.